We've got two things happening here. We are recording a video webinar, and we are also recording this on Spaces, X Spaces, and we will do our best to never say Twitter, the word we don't speak of now that it's X. So today we are going to be talking about cannabis rescheduling and what that means for cannabis business owners. My name is Emily Cisneros. I'm the founder and CEO of Canna Business Services, and we've got here our GM, Marissa Cortez, and Beth Panicucci, our Director of Operations. So people are welcome to join, listen in, and we will also be reposting this on all of our social media platforms so people can replay the audio or the video, whichever one they prefer. Awesome. Okay, so why don't we kick it off and let's just start talking about rescheduling and what it means. Beth, I will kick it over to you to kind of get the conversation started.
Sounds good. All right, so we want to give just a little bit of background. Sorry, there's like a little bit of a delay, so it threw me off. Okay, so we want to give a little bit of background on cannabis rescheduling initially, and then we will go into some Q&A that we received from everyone who submitted, who maybe couldn't be here or is able to join today. So we'll go through those questions and then provide some answers.
Awesome. And I think, I think maybe before we even get into the rescheduling overview, why don't we talk about cannabis, where it is, scheduling itself. So maybe before we go into the history of the DEA's recommendation and the Justice Department and everything like that, let's talk about scheduling. Let's talk about what that means and why it's important. Because I think a lot of people are making the assumption that people understand what is so significant about cannabis being labeled a Schedule I drug. So just to kind of kick it off, we are talking about rescheduling of cannabis and what that means, what the significance of it is. And I think it's important to first talk about scheduling in and of itself. So the DEA, on the DEA's website, you can find drug scheduling. And on the drug scheduling list, they list out way more than cannabis. And I think that's important to understand because that's, in my opinion, where a lot of the issue, there's practical business and economic IRS, tax, insurance, banking, ramifications of scheduling, but also just from a practical standpoint, what scheduling actually implicates. So currently, Schedule I is basically the highest level of scheduling you can get. And scheduling goes all the way down to 5. A level 5 is basically your certain cough medicines that may not have a lot of codeine in it and things like that. Low levels of that, very little risk of addiction, things like that. Those are things that you might be able to get over the counter or with a prescription, I honestly, Robitussin would probably be the best example. So then you kind of go up the chain into harder drugs. And that's what makes this so crazy is because when you start getting into Schedule II drugs, that's when you're starting to talk about fentanyl and Adderall and Ritalin and things that are heavily addicting. They may have a medical benefit, and that's not really the dispute, right? Dilaudid, oxycodone, those types of things, they have medical benefits. And a lot of things like fentanyl patches are used for people in end of life situations to minimize their pain and in other type of ailments. So the dispute here and the challenge here isn't regarding what other drugs are on the schedule, but we understand how potent fentanyl is. And that's a Schedule II. And what's above a Schedule II is a Schedule I, which means there is no medical use for them at all. Schedule II, at least there's some medical use, but high potential of abuse. Medical or Schedule I, no medical use and a high potential for abuse. So cannabis is on there, but also heroin. So that's, I think, the biggest thing. So you got meth, heroin, and you've got cannabis. And you've got a couple other things too, but peyote is also one on there. But so I guess let's chat about that. So what does that kind of mean to you two? When it comes to seeing cannabis on a Schedule I, we all actually come from Pennsylvania. We all live in different states. Beth lives in Pennsylvania still, but so you're talking about different backgrounds, different environments growing up, different life experiences, but we all can agree that cannabis should not be on Schedule 1.
This is a great place to start, Emily, because as you said, I think we can all agree it's never belonged there. It's never belonged there. And this started a long time ago, or it was put on there a long time ago. I have personally had family members that have passed away from fentanyl, from abusing it. They did not need it. And then it's a Schedule 2, like Emily said, that's under what cannabis is. And in the same token, I have had many family members and myself that, I mean, cannabis has genuinely saved our lives in one way or another. And myself being in Colorado, I've been out here for 10 years since the inception of the adult use cannabis market in Colorado. So for the last decade, not only have I been immersed in consuming it for my own medicinal reasons, but I've been immersed in every aspect of it, from the growing to the manufacturing of products, all the way through to sale. I've seen it help people. I've seen the entire state of Colorado in the last 10 years level of overdose deaths from drugs like fentanyl and Oxycontin that are in a schedule below cannabis, that abuse rate go down, not just 1 point, but like, over 10% in a matter of years because of the fact that cannabis has been legalized. I mean, it's directly connected. So I feel very strongly about this rescheduling, and it's absolutely been a long time coming because there is no denying anymore. And I'm glad that the federal government sees it as well, for the most part, that there are many medicinal uses for this amazing plant.
And I think too, I agree with everything you said, Marissa. It's been, a really long time coming. It was originally classified a very long time ago, hasn't been revisited over, the past 10, 15 years. It's become more acceptable in everyday use. Even if it's not legal everywhere, it's just becoming more the norm, more acceptable. And at this point in time, there's so many studies, so many statistics, so many stories from people about how cannabis can benefit their anxiety condition, PTSD, cancer treatments. It's just really no longer a question that it should be in Schedule 1, but it's long, long overdue to move to a schedule where more research can be conducted on its effects and more clinical trials and things like that.
Absolutely. And this jumps ahead a little bit, but I think it's important to kind of touch on what the implications are of rescheduling before I get into the history a little bit, but the implications from a practical standpoint for business owners in the space, and not just cannabis plant touching businesses. We call them plant touching when they're dispensaries, they're labs, they're cultivators and manufacturers, extractors, things like that, transportation companies, but also the ancillary companies, consultants, attorneys, insurance companies, banks, like everyone who interacts and engages on a day-to-day basis with the plant touching entities. There's impacts on both type of sectors here. So I think it would be important to maybe talk through some of that as well.
And Emily, that was actually one of the questions we got prior to starting today. So that would definitely be a good next
Perfect.
one.
Yeah, and I think it's a question that a lot of our clients ask. What does this mean? And that's why we actually started this webinar today and this X Live Spaces this video and audio recording, because that's a question we get all the time.
Absolutely. So I'll just start with the banks, since that was one of the ones you mentioned. Rescheduling can ease restrictions for banking service for cannabis businesses and ancillary businesses. Right now, cannabis companies really have to stay away from the national banks, the big chain banks, the ones who maybe have lower fees, less barriers to getting an account started, and things like that. And they won't accept the use because of the status of cannabis at the federal level. And so businesses are restricted to choosing banks within their state that are often smaller. They can charge higher fees because cannabis businesses have limited choices. And so not even with banks, but any other similar business like that, the fees will come down. There'll be more choices for those businesses, and it'll increase the offer of services and efficiency for everyone.
That's such a good point. And I think, practically speaking, we work with clients all over the world. And when we're working with clients in the legal markets in the US, they always come back to this pain point, which is what banks are even allowing me to work with them. And these are operators who are running an otherwise cash heavy business. It used to be all cash. Now we're seeing the introduction of some payment alternatives like debit cards and things like that, but or PIN debit. But when it comes to banking, it's a major issue because our clients need a place to, imagine running any business that's not plant touching and struggling to come up with 3 banks in your entire state that will work with you. That's, and I think it's easy to get lost in the aggravation of all of this. But what's nice is every time you see this friction happen, it's because of the movement that's happening. Like Beth, you said it perfectly, and I'll botch what you said, but basically in summary, it was that that movement's already here. A large majority of people understand its medicinal value, its place in the economy, its place with businesses. And so you've got this movement and overwhelming support for the industry. And then you've got federal regulations that conflict and state regulations that are opening up the market. So when that conflict happens, you're going to have a natural rub. And the rub is where we need to focus our attention to alleviate those pain points. And banking is certainly one of them. And oftentimes we get clients that come to us and say, okay, help me find a bank. We help them through that. In fact, Marissa, I'll toss it over to you because we're working intensively on a build out project with the client, and banking took us quite a few months to get ironed out. So we're on this project for a client right now. We are basically supporting them as a management team through build out, through licensure, build out, investigative audits, on-site visits, getting open, and then operating and flourishing. But one of the first things we tackle is banking. We don't need it quite yet, but why did we hit it early? And what were some of the pain points that we hit along the way?
And Beth, I'll loop you into this too, because we actually have both been on this. It took so long. Beth had to move to other projects and I took over because it was such a lengthy process. 10 years ago in Colorado, there was one bank in the entire state that we could bank with as cannabis businesses. So I already have a little bit of PTSD here with this entire process. And now it has definitely gotten better. I am not, carrying my knapsack of $20,000 to the city of Denver for excise tax payments anymore, which is great. But there's still only 3 banks in the entire state of New Jersey, for example, a huge, up and coming market here. So we knew better. We knew that it was going to take time because it's not, the bank may present it as a simple application. It's not ever going to be that. There is so much there. And as frustrating as the process can be, it's not the bank's fault. The bank has to cover themselves. All financial institutions that are going to have any sort of interaction with cannabis, they have to cover every single base. Because at the end of the day, our client brings the bank on once they're operational. A year from that, at least, some, it depends, it has to be quarterly. They're going to go through an intensive audit with that bank. And then on what happens from there is then the higher ups from the bank come in and they have to do an intensive audit of the bank and every cannabis client from the bank. So it all trickles down from the top, making it just imperative to get started as soon as possible. Some of the hurdles that we are still encountering though, here we are, it took, Beth, how long do you think it took to get that bank account up and running?
I think about 5 months to have it where you could make the initial deposit to hold it open, because that's one of the other issues is there's a certain amount of money you have to put in the bank account once it's approved to hold it open.
Exactly. And so, okay, we got approved. We opened our account. Helped our client open their account. A month later, we need to pay someone. We need to pay a contractor. We're trying to get to grand opening here. Oh, wait, there's an entire other application and wait period if you want to send a wire transfer. Same thing if you would like to order checks. It is such a arduous process and it's so convoluted, but again, it has to be because of where cannabis has sat for so long in the CSA, which is at Schedule 1, CSA being the Controlled Substances Act. So it is absolutely a trickle-down effect. And while there's nothing necessarily concrete in Health and Human Services and the DEA's recommendation for the reschedule, as far as banking goes, the idea is that it's continued destigmatization. If there are memos that we anticipate being, coming out, and this even lends into interstate commerce. Nothing changes with this rescheduling outright. If everything goes through, we get through public comment and it's officially put on the Federal Register, nothing changes with interstate commerce. However, it can, like it absolutely
Right.
can, and it opens it up to a simple memo for a policy change. Just like the Cole memo that we saw in 2013 changed a lot. It kind of decriminalized it in a sense, not an official sense, but in a sense to the point where cannabis businesses in California, Washington, Colorado, that have been operating medically for quite some time weren't getting hit as hard by the DEA and the federal government as they had before.
And to your point, Marissa, that's one of the reasons the bigger banks won't take the accounts is the issue with interstate commerce and its federally illegal status where it's currently scheduled. So that opportunity would be huge for some of these ancillary businesses as well as the cannabis businesses themselves.
And that's just one aspect. And I know
Mhm.
really the focus of this is kind of rescheduling as well, and all of the broad, and maybe we make this a part two. Maybe we dig in, maybe as a part two, we just dig into to some of the real things that our clients as business owners and all of us having been in the industry for, our team has been in the industry for a collective, 50 some years. And
Yes.
we've been through it in this industry. So we know a lot about what the pain points are and how to alleviate those stress points. And just to go back a little bit too, this is all about rescheduling cannabis from a Schedule 1 to a Schedule 3, which means banking's going to be a little bit easier in a sense. And that's really what we're getting at. So when we talk about moving it from a Schedule 1 to a Schedule 3, you're talking about the Tylenol with codeine, certain types of anabolic steroids, things like that, where there could be physical abuse, but there is an acknowledged medical use for them. But it also allows the pharmaceutical industry to enter the space and the FDA to regulate it because it's not federally illegal. So there's going to be some money put behind research of that. And just as a little bit of a background, because I think it's important to note, this didn't all just happen recently. This started back in 2022 in the fall when the Biden administration asked the Attorney General and the Secretary of Health and Human Services also to launch their scientific investigation into cannabis scheduling, and maybe what that means, what the implications are under federal law, and some other things too, right? So then by the time, almost a year later, of August of last year of 2023, that's when the Health and Human Services, they actually came up with their official recommendations. And then from there, the Attorney General requested the legal advice of the Justice Department, their legal counsel office. And that is the bridge from, okay, we've done our research on it. Now we need legal opinion on what is relevant to the rulemaking process of rescheduling this. And that's when the legal counsel office, or the Office of Legal Counsel, rather, they provided their official response. And that's when the Attorney General executed its authority to initiate the rulemaking process. And then just 2 weeks ago, that's when the DEA made their official recommendation. So that's the process that it takes. Now, we can all have our opinions on the Biden administration, their recommendations for this, the conservatives, Democrats, or I should say, Republicans, Democrats, conservatives, liberals. I think at the end of the day, apart from getting into the politics of all of it, it just goes back to the voice of the people cannot be stopped. And so when you are looking to make a movement, this has been a grassroots effort for decades. And it goes back to the pain points once again. All of that friction, all of the painstaking efforts along the way, people getting thrown in jail for advocating for it, for using it as a medicine for their child with epilepsy, for having to cross state lines with it and sneak it across, a state border to get it to their family member. All of those things stack on top of each other until an administration cannot ignore it. And then, like all administrations, it doesn't matter who it is in office and what administration is in power, it doesn't matter. They know what will help them get in the good graces and in the favor of the public. And so it's up to us. We can blame politicians for all of this, but at the end of the day, this movement is because of the people. And it's because of the people who've taken the steps to commit illegal acts and advocate for it vocally and risk their jobs and their livelihoods to make this happen. So I think it's actually a really pretty beautiful thing we get to live through this time period. I mean, it was only what, scheduled in 1970, around 1970. That's when it landed on the schedule. This is,
Yeah.
it's new to all of us because we weren't alive in 1970. But people before 1970, people in the 1910s weren't seeing it this way. Around 1920s, that's when it started to be propagandized, and that's when it started to be used more politically. But before that, hemp was commonplace. I mean, the Philippines, I think it was the Philippines, we were giving them money basically to grow it. And then when the world wars happened, we couldn't, I'm going to probably misspeak on facts. It's going to be like drunk history lessons. So I shouldn't really speak too much in detail of it. But
Those are funny though.
you know, where they are funny. But I will be 100% inaccurate. But all of that to say, it has been part of history and commerce since the beginning of recorded time. It has been used in temples in India. It has been used in medicine. I mean, it's been here and it's not going anywhere. So why not let it be part of this country and let it be part of businesses? So,
Absolutely.
Beth, do you have any other questions you think would be relevant? I know we're already past the bottom of the hour. We wanted to keep this close to 30 minutes, but why don't you maybe point out one more cool fact or one more cool question we can answer, and then we can kind of wrap.
We touched on a lot of aspects of some of our questions throughout our conversation so far. I think the only one we really didn't talk about yet is what implications does this have for individuals who are incarcerated right now for cannabis related offenses?
Unfortunately, on the one side of it, there is actually nothing concrete, in this whole rescheduling process that releases incarcerated individuals once this is actually rescheduled. So that is the downside. However, there's always an upside here. And there's definitely an upside here. And a big part of it, I think, lies in the fact that this is a huge step forward for destigmatizing cannabis as a whole in our country. And I know we've been taking baby steps for quite some time, but this is arguably the most historic leap that we've had, in the last 50 years, as far as policy goes in the realm of cannabis. So while there isn't going to be an immediate release of thousands of prisoners as soon as this rescheduling happens, there are still anticipated, presidential pardons that we can possibly anticipate, just depending. There's a lot of dependence there. I won't even get into that. But overall, we expect to see change. We remain hopeful for change. We remain hopeful that this will spawn release of additional prisoners. I mean, and we're even seeing it through some of these state programs who are implementing it in that way. And, because of this rescheduling, might not get the pushback that they may have initially received, because we're seeing it in these states, certain bills that are trying to be pushed through and whatnot can happen, pushed through 10 times, written 10 different ways, and they'll still fail. So we're really hoping to see that open up because of what this means, because of this acknowledged medical use.
And the hope is that there's a lot more expungement initiatives started, an increase in social equity programs, and then reentry support as well for people who were released. So hopefully that gets increased and those initiatives continue to rise as the rescheduling process moves forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's probably the toughest part in this industry is you see people flourishing in business ownership while you know that there are people still behind bars for it. This situation, I just think it can't be argued. And I think that's why we're seeing, and I'm excited about the next 5 to 10 years, because we're seeing young Republicans and Democrats as a whole really advocate towards better policies around cannabis. And so I think the old school Republicans, the old GOP, they've been largely vocally against it. But younger Republicans are like, it's here. And why don't we see that as an economic benefit? And how do we structure our programs to be more beneficial? We're actually seeing that in Pennsylvania. And then you've got Democrats who've been largely vocally for it for many decades. So now the question is anyone going to do anything about it? Because no one ever does anything about it, except for the fact that it is this rescheduling is a big shift. Now it's going to be a slow roll type of thing, and that the implications and the ramifications that are going to slow roll out for businesses, but it's all positive and it's all momentum. So I think this is a really good start to speak on rescheduling and what that means for cannabis business owners. I know we want to do a part 2 where we're going to speak a little bit more about, well, actually, we're going to talk about 280E. That's the IRS code. And there's 470C, there's ESOPs. There's so many things in the IRS code that are really important for business owners to know. We are not financial advisors, but we do, just like banking, it's an important facet for business owners to understand, and rescheduling affects that. So we'll continue to talk about rescheduling and some other things. And I'd like to also continue talking about some of the pain points our clients see and how we help them around it. So any parting words, Marissa?
Just that I'm really, really excited to be a part of this time that we're in right now. It's been a long time coming, and I could sit here and talk about this all day because I just think it's so monumental, but happy to be here and looking forward to part 2.
Beth?
Yeah, I'm happy to be here, and thank you all for coming and joining us. And we really look forward to seeing you for part 2.
Awesome. And maybe instead of drunk history, where I misquote historic facts, maybe we can make it, I don't know, high history, where we just smoke a little bit. I would be far more accurate if I had a vape instead of alcohol. This is coffee, so I'm just inaccurate with coffee. But yeah, awesome. Well, we were really, really happy to do this and happy to answer the questions that were submitted to us. And feel free to follow along on social media. We're ramping up our socials. We get so busy with clients. Social media was never really the forefront of our business. Our business is helping clients get to the finish line and making them very, very successful. And that's what we do all day, every day. It's what we live and breathe it, and we're really excited. And yeah, we're happy to share more about what we know. We're going to start to be launching more on socials, especially X Spaces, and we're really excited to have a platform for the first time ever that allows the word cannabis, that we don't have to write cannabis in a weird way so it doesn't get flagged. Twitter or X Spaces is the shift. Twitter, it was banned on. X, it is not. And so we are here to stay. And we're really thankful to Elon and everyone else who's been a part of X to allow us to have this platform, because cannabis is here to stay, and we might as well be able to spell it out correctly on a platform. So thank you all for joining, and we look forward to part 2. Thank you all.